Is the FBI lying to us? Why was President Trump shot at? Now we're just finding out that Thomas Matthew Crooks' body was secretly cremated, that Congress, who had requested the opportunity to review the autopsy, just had that taken away. I'm going to go through this and other big stories. Today I have on special guest Dr. Carol Lieberman. Dr. Carol, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So I'm sure you saw this in the news, but the body of Thomas Matthew Crooks, yes. The FBI, they took it. They didn't tell anybody while we're all going, what happened? Where is the Secret Service failure? They were burning the body. They were burning the evidence and didn't tell anybody. Congress had specifically requested for a team to be able to review the autopsy. What are your thoughts on this big story?
Very fishy. I mean, you know, that's like a red flag that they were trying to hide something. Surely his parents, you know, didn't need, I mean, yes, I'm sure they wanted to bury him and so on, but there wasn't a rush. And in any case, Congress should have taken precedence. I mean, and the family should recognize that this is of historical and national importance. There's so much that's fishy in this case. I mean, the only thing that I have seen in regard to the father is that his initial statement, what was it? Something, I don't know what the hell is going on or something like that. And then he hasn't shown his face. His Thomas Crooks' mother hasn't shown her face. I mean, of course, presumably they're embarrassed or they don't want to get into worse trouble or something. They don't want to be charged. You know, that's one of the interesting things. When I first heard about this and I was, you know, talking about it and trying to explain what would make somebody do that, and I was talking about how he fits the profile of a school shooter, and then and I was talking about how his parents should be charged, just like Ethan Crumbley's parents, the school shooter in Michigan, were charged and convicted, actually, and because of their son's actions. And now, of course, Ethan was 16 and Thomas was 20. But you know, it's sort of the same principle. There must be something they could charge them with. But so it's so interesting that and it turns out that when they looked at his phones or his internet, that he had in fact been searching a lot of people, not just Trump. He was searching Biden. He was searching the DNC. He was searching certain celebrities, some royals. But he also was searching for Ethan Crumbley and his parents. So, of course, as a psychiatrist, one of the things that I have to think about, it gives me great pleasure to think about, actually, because of the psychodynamics, family psychodynamics, is that perhaps he was trying to get back at his parents and hoping that they would charge them.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's an angle I hadn't considered. Now, when you say he fits the profile of a school shooter, help me understand what you mean by that.
Sure. Well, the school shooters, the typical profile of a school shooter is, first of all, their home life. They come from a dysfunctional family where they were abused and or neglected. And we don't know that, as I was just saying, we don't really know that much about his family, but chances are he was neglected because, for one thing, now also school shooters have some kind of mental illness, psychological problems, which are they're never either brought for treatment, or if they are brought for treatment, they get lost, you know, amongst the cracks. The fault of the parents, the fault of the psychiatric professionals, you know, the person just falls through the cracks. And so, for example, with Thomas, his classmates say, they use the term relentlessly bullied. So, and he sat alone at lunch, you know, all the time. And he was isolated. Some students said that he had a small group of friends, like the sort of the odd ones out. Now, if a parent has to know this, you know, they have to know that there is that their child doesn't have a lot of friends, that they are, that they're coming home rather unhappy. They look forlorn. They should have brought him to therapy. Now, another interesting thing, he searched for major depression. Now, he was never apparently diagnosed formally with that, at least from what we know so far. Perhaps he was looking that up for himself. Perhaps he was looking it up for his parents, one of his parents. So that's one thing. But, it's always so frustrating because these people could have been stopped before they shot up a school or shot up a grocery store, or, these, if they had gotten enough mental health attention, they could have been stopped.
Yeah. Let's go back to, I'm sure you've done research on the JFK assassination cover-up. They tell us that the bullet came from the back, that it went through his shoulder, out his neck, into the governor of Texas, through his wrist and over in, like this magic squiggly bullet, right?
Right.
But the big thing was, because he was shot in the head from the front, they end up sewing his head back on, covering it up. Those pictures were buried for nearly 60 years. And the people that reviewed it, they were harassed and coerced into giving certain testimonies. They later reneged on those testimonies later in life. Do you think with the burning of this body, shouldn't Congress immediately get the autopsy doctors in under oath and testifying to what they saw? Because there's a lot of things that don't add up with the shooting story.
Well, yes, but if they have lied, yes, Congress wanted an independent pathologist to do the autopsy and to check on all of these things. So if the first people who looked at the body lied, I guess we're going to have to, it's not just that he was buried, but it's that he was cremated. If he were just buried, they could dig up the body and do some tests and so on. But he was cremated. That's what makes it really fishy.
Yeah.
There's so many things about the lack of security, and all these stories of people who saw the gunman on the roof and tried to alert the police and security and all of that, and nobody did anything. And all of that is just suspect in itself.
Yeah. You're considered America's terrorist therapist ever since 9/11. You have been helping people deal with trauma, the fear of terrorism, things like that. What was your initial reaction when President Biden tried to give those 3 people in Guantanamo Bay that planned and carried out the 9/11 attack, basically like a free pass on the death penalty? And then you have General Lloyd Austin, head of the Pentagon. He comes in and says, "Are you crazy? No, I'm in charge. Biden, you're out of your freaking mind. We are not giving terrorists a free pass." What was your first reaction to that?
Well, first of all, I kudos to Austin. First of all, I was aware of this last year because every 9/11, I do something for the anniversary, and in particular for the last 3 years, I've been doing. I had created a music video all about why we must remember 9/11, how those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, how to talk to kids about terrorism, just a whole bunch of things, mainly to remind people about what happened on 9/11. And so last year, when I was putting all this together, I had put it together 3 years ago. Now it's 4 years ago. And I'm going to be doing it again this year. So the mobile billboards go around Manhattan and Washington, D.C. And so I of course talk a lot about 9/11 and so on, in addition to having this mobile billboard. And one of the stories that was out last year was about how they wanted to do just this. They wanted to give them a free pass and a plea deal and let them escape death. And the families from 9/11, particularly from the Twin Towers, were outraged. They gave them, they let them know about this a month, really in the same, pretty much the same time frame, a month before the 9/11 anniversary. What timing, And so the families were outraged, and they tried to stop it. They gave them they sent out a notice, and then they gave them like less than a week to reply to it. And then at the last minute, somehow somebody got it stopped. I guess these families put enough pressure on. But now here it is again. So, I guess last year they finally didn't didn't go through with it because the families, put up enough pressure. But so here it pops up again at the same time. Like, if you're trying to hide something, you don't do it right before the anniversary is coming up. So anyhow, so thank goodness that it was stopped. I mean, but here's the thing. It's not just this. It's not just that they wanted to give these terrorists a free pass. It's that they have been doing things that, by they, I mean the Obama-Biden White House, has been doing things for years to try to make us forget 9/11. I mean, last year, for example, Biden was the first president who didn't commemorate 9/11 by going to one of the sites of the attack, to New York or Pennsylvania or the Pentagon. And so they have been trying, and one of the horrible things too, another horrible thing is that in New York, they let the museum, there were two 9/11 museums. One is the big one, the main one, but there was also a 9/11 museum that was primarily run by, and nurtured by the families from 9/11. And that they let that museum, after the pandemic, I mean, museums weren't doing well after the pandemic, during and after the pandemic. And so that museum had to close. And now, we're giving billions to Iran, right? But then they let this museum close, and it would take like a pittance compared to what the Obama gives to Iran. Obama is the biggest threat to America. And he's been doing it. He did it when he was the president. He made us the most vulnerable to terrorists. He did it through Biden because of Biden's dementia. He was able to control Biden. And now he's controlling Kamala. Yeah. So, and in my opinion, it has to do with his having been raised for some years in a madrasa where, what do they teach? They teach, they teach terrorism is what they teach to children as young as 4 years old. And they teach, if not younger, but they give them guns when they're 4 years old. So they teach the if you want to go to heaven, if you want to be loved by Allah, you have to destroy Israel and you have to kill all the Jews. That's the first thing. But it's also global jihad, not just Jews. You have to kill anybody who doesn't believe in Allah and who are unbelievers, non-believers, the infidels. And so this is what Obama learned in his years in a madrasa. And I think that we look at what he's done. He's been carrying this out as long as he has been in power. We have, of course, terrorists crossing our borders. We have these things that I was just talking about, trying to get people to forget 9/11. All this anti-Semitism on the college campuses. I mean, I believe that the whole thing goes back, the buck stops at Obama. And if Kamala is elected, which I hope, the only way, I think the only way that would happen is if they do the same thing they did in 2020, cheat. But that is the end of America. I'm starting to think about where I'm going to move because that is really the end of not only the American dream, but capitalism, because, capitalism is racist, right? And just the end of all that this country is based on.
Yeah. Well, look at the coup that they just carried out against a sitting president. The number one person leading the charge, Barack Hussein Obama. He's the one that put Hollywood in. He called them in to start destroying him. He called on Pelosi and Schumer. I mean, this pressure campaign to remove their friend. I mean, it's just sad to watch. Even though I'm no fan of Joe Biden, watching a coup against a sitting president by a former president, it was disturbing to watch. And now he's trying to install Kamala Harris.
I love that.
Trump needs to start calling her Kamala Harris, and here's why. And then point out all the ways she's scamming America. But my point is like they're going to install another Marxist-focused leader, and Obama will be calling the shots from behind the scenes.
Yes, and going back to the near assassination, before that, just recently though, a Democrat introduced a bill into Congress. You probably know this. Introduced a bill into Congress where all felons wouldn't be able to have Secret Service. Did you hear about that?
Yes.
And so what was that? That was a setup for an assassination. And quite frankly, they still want to assassinate him. They're saying Iran, that there was a plot by Iran. Maybe there was. I don't know if that was who got to Thomas Crooks, if they had anything to do with that. But there's still this desire to get rid of him. I mean, like for now, he's back over above Kamala in the polls again. Every time they report something like that, I mean, on the one hand, that's nice, that's good, but on the other hand, that's going to make the other side do even more illegal things or more life-threatening things to Trump. I mean, that can't be a coincidence that they just when they're charging him with all these felonies, right, and convicted him because of a scammy judge, a judge who should not be on the bench. So after they convict him of felonies, and then they try to pass something that says he can't have a Secret Service. I mean, he almost didn't have a Secret Service anyway, even though they were standing there. It's so obvious, they think we're morons, that we're not going to put these things together. Unfortunately, a lot of Americans aren't paying enough attention to this, just like with terrorism. They're not paying enough attention to what's really going on. I mean, I think that they are overwhelmed. Americans are overwhelmed. First of all, we came out of the pandemic less hardy physically and psychologically. And now with all of the Bidenomics, where people are just worried about having enough money to put food on the table. So we're not really, people need to pay more attention to these things. It's not that they couldn't get it if they were told it enough times or it was explained to them enough, but they're just kind of heads in the sand, sort of it's too much, too overwhelming.
Yeah. Let's go to some international news, because I read a lot of international news. One of the things that's very concerning for me, because I worry that it's coming to America, it's coming to my children, is I'm watching Ireland, England, France, but specifically right now in England, where you have all these illegal immigrants coming in from Muslim nations, African nations, Asian nations. And they're taking advantage of the kindness of the government leaders of these countries. But then what they're doing is they're bankrupting the voters with tax money, and they're giving it to these illegals. And then they're rising, and they keep growing and bringing in more family. And then now there are towns in Ireland and London where there's more illegals than there are citizens, and they've overwhelmed their voting systems. They've overwhelmed their stores and schools. What are your thoughts on this situation in Europe?
I went to medical school in Belgium, which is another country that is overwhelmed. I even recognized it then. I didn't have any clue that it was going to get to be this bad. But like there were towns. I went to school in Louvain, and so I would go into Brussels a lot. And when the train would go through this particular part of town, where it was where migrants, were congregating. There was always this creepy feeling that came over me, and a feeling of not being safe. And then I lived in Paris and I lived in London also. So my heart is with these countries. And I saw the beginnings, not so much in England, well, a little bit, but I did see the beginnings in France. And the leaders have just been allowing it to grow and grow and grow. By it, I mean these radical Islamist migrants to take over. And, and Germany sort of at one point invited the most at one point. And Germany is in really bad shape right now too. And then the other countries, and then the European Union made the countries take in a certain amount. But we have countries like Hungary and Poland that said no, and that they would pay. I don't know if they have paid or they don't plan to pay or whatever. The important thing is they did not take any migrants. They're in the European Union, but they refused to go along with this. And their countries now are safe, while the other countries are crawling with these people. And it's gotten to the tipping point where the numbers are just, they outnumber the police, they outnumber, in certain towns, like you were saying, in Ireland and all of that, in some places they outnumber the people in the towns. And yes, they've gotten a lot of radical Islamist people elected to Parliament, for example, in England. But France used to be, for a while, France was really other than Germany, but France was, there were attacks happening in France like almost every day. The mainstream media doesn't tell you any of this. I mean, that's why Americans don't really know about this. You can find it online. You can find it on Twitter. But like in France, for example, women get raped, and in England, actually, in England, they have these towns where they groom teenage girls, and the police have turned a blind eye to it. I mean, it's unbelievable the things that are happening. And now England has gotten worse. They've been just, letting them come in by the droves. And what's even, this is going to happen in France. I mean, it has been happening in France to some degree too, but in England now, the government is standing up for these radical Islamist migrants over the British citizens. You can't say anything. They're arresting older people. They're arresting women. There was a woman who said, I don't want my taxes going to these migrants, I don't want all my money going to them. And she got arrested, and they're getting long jail times. And it's just, I mean, it's like Alice in Wonderland falling down the hole, and the world is topsy-turvy. I had, one of my tweets, I talked about where's King Charles? And then I came across a video of King Charles agreeing with all of this. I mean, the Queen would be turning over in her grave.
Yeah. I saw a couple of days ago, a woman was assaulted by an illegal immigrant, and she complained about it, and they arrested her for publicly complaining and not the person for publicly beating her face in.
Yes.
I mean, something is really wrong when the abuser gets excused and the complainer of the abuse gets arrested. So, yes. I mean, kudos to Poland and Hungary, but I agree. I think Europe is at a tipping point, and America, if they don't pay attention,
yes,
we're going to be overwhelmed too. And it seems the Democrats want this. They want them to either affect the number of House of Representatives. They want them to turn red states purple and then blue. They want, affecting the election. They don't care. They're willing to throw America out in order to have power. And that's pretty scary.
And, to the extent that Americans are aware of this, like if they go on Twitter or, not just Twitter, but like look this up on the internet. There are places where you can find it. You can Google it. But to the extent that they are aware of this, they still don't realize that this is coming to America. They think, oh, well, that's too bad. That's going to ruin my vacation plans, but they don't realize these guys are coming for you too. They're here already. Hello. I mean, we're going to have an attack any day now. I was shocked that that there wasn't a terror attack, a bigger attack at the Olympics. And clearly there was an attack. It didn't get very much publicity, but and they certainly didn't call it a terror attack, but there was an attack on the trains, as I'm sure you know, coming into Paris for the opening ceremony. And they set fire to different boxes, different materials, different mechanisms that were controlling the trains. And so they stopped these trains from coming in for the opening ceremony. So that was terrorism. And I'm sure there were plans that were foiled. They had 30,000 people, investigators. They had a huge, bigger than any other Olympics, people trying to foil terror attacks. So I guess they were successful in terms of what we know. But it is it's an imminent threat here. There are so many terrorists here, and the one in Vienna, the terrorist plot that got them to cancel Taylor Swift's concerts in Vienna. It was teenagers. So, it was one 19-year-old boy who was radicalized over the internet. I mean, that's the thing. It's not just the people coming across the border. It's anybody who has a computer or a phone. They get radicalized over the internet. So he was radicalized. He pledged allegiance to ISIS, and he was planning to attack her concert. And he worked for a metal, some company that it had metals. And so he was able to get the things that he needed to make the bomb, some of them at least, he stole them from his company. And then he had a friend, a 17-year-old, who also was, a believer in ISIS. And now the 17-year-old got a job as security in the Taylor Swift concert, of all things. And the 19-year-old, his plan was to do a ramming attack, which is a favorite of terrorists. They take their car or their truck and they just ram. It's very easy. You don't need to build a bomb. But his plan was to ram the concert goers, the people who were outside. And because, she brought so many, so there were going to be 65 or 70,000 people at the concert. And then there are also lots of people outside who try to listen to it and just, show their support. And so he was going to do a ramming attack and then get out with a machete and another knife and explode his bomb. And he, was expecting to die in that himself. So he would be like a suicide bomber and he would be a martyr. So look what it would have taken, just two teenagers. They also arrested a third one or questioned a third one. But basically, two teenagers could have perpetrated this attack.
Yeah. Tell me about your book, Lions, Tigers, Terrorists, Oh My. What is that about? What are we going to learn by reading it?
Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror, is a book. The first half of the book is for parents and teachers, grown-ups, so it's written like for a grown-up. And the second half is a picture book for kids. So the idea is the grown-up reads the grown-up part and learns about how to talk to kids about terrorism, how it's so important not to hide and pretend that everything's going to be okay. I mean, there's certain ways to talk about them. I have answers to the typical questions that kids ask. I talk about how it's important to get the kids, most important is to get the kids to express their feelings about what they know is going on. And I talk about ways to do that and how kids will show that they're being affected, scared, sad, mad, or bad. And so it's all these kinds of things, what every grown-up needs to know. And then for the kids, I write it in sort of gentle terms, of course, not to scare them. But I don't, leave anything out. Like I talk about, what is a terrorist? A terrorist is like a bully on the playground. And then I talk about 9/11. I show the picture of Osama bin Laden. I ask them to draw a picture of what you think a terrorist looks like. And then I show them the picture of Osama bin Laden. And I talk about the underwear bomber. Can you imagine, putting a bomb in your underwear? And then I talk about the cartoons in Paris, all the classic signs, the classic events in regard to terrorism, the Boston Marathon. And then I have a part where there's to help them express their feelings. And then at the end, it's like 10 things to do that you can do, that kids can do on their own to make them more resilient to terrorism. Everything from taking their vitamins to not watching violent media, and video games and movies and so on, to not having, I do talk about Islamophobia, how you shouldn't judge someone by what they look like. You should judge them by what's in their heart. Which was kind of interesting because I did an interview for an Israeli paper, and I had to kind of modify things because it's hard to not have Islamophobia in Israel, and it's hard to not believe that what's in their heart is blackness, darkness. Yeah. But anyway, that's a special situation. But and then, the very last thing is numbers and telephone numbers and addresses, or, how to text for people where you could go to, like if there's a terror attack and your parents can't come to you at school or wherever you are, what to do if they're in case of a terror attack.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and spending time with me. I'm going to put a direct link to your book down below, as well as your X account. And then is terroristtherapist.com. Is that the best website for people to visit?
Yes, there's a lot of things on there. You can see the mobile billboard that I was talking about, for example.
Okay, great. Well, I'll put those down below. Dr. Carol Lieberman, thank you so much for coming on, for all that you do. And I'll put those links down below. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.